But it's ultimately like, look, we all have relationships. And I don't just mean romantic relationships. It's anything, relationships with our kids or being a kid. Like everyone is that relationship, whether your parents are around or not, you're still somebody's kid. And that relationship means something to you. Step siblings, romantic or ex-romantic relationships, whether you're married or not, coworkers, your boss, your subordinates, even just driving down the street, other drivers around you, going to a store and the person checking you out, or, how do they treat you? These are all relationships, and they influence how we experience life. And a lot of us struggle with them.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What's up, Men of Abundance? I am Wally Carmichael, your founder and host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community, proving to you that you can, in fact, live a life of abundance and prosperity in family, faith, finances, and fitness. It's more than a decision, it's a lifestyle. But first, in many cases, it's a complete mind shift, and it's not something that happens overnight. That's why it's so important to hang out, get into mastermind groups, get on the podcast, read the books about people who are, in fact, living a life of abundance and somehow paying it forward and sharing their ups and downs, not just the wins. Because we learn much more from the kick in the gut moment, those moments of adversity, than we do the wins. Yes, we'll learn from the wins, no doubt about it. But we learn so much more, we become so much more when we face adversity and overcome it. We become much stronger physically and mentally. Now, of course, you can tell based on the title of this episode, we are going to be talking about strengthening relationships. Not just personal relationships, but professional relationships as well. And as you know, if you've listened to at least one of the episodes of Men of Abundance, you know we get much more into many other topics, mostly because I just go off on a tangent. This conversation is absolutely no different. Nonetheless, I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. And you know as well as I do, others are going to need to hear this conversation as well. So be abundant in your actions today, pay it forward, and share Men of Abundance with others. And if you would be so kind, and if you're up to it, then go to iTunes and leave a rating and review. It means so much for the life of the show, but more than that, it lets other people find Men of Abundance. It gets all of these amazing conversations out there so others can enjoy and benefit from all the wisdom. Those who find it will greatly appreciate it. I appreciate it, and all of our past and future guests greatly appreciate it. Now, our featured guest today is a repeat guest because he's just that awesome. He is the best-selling author, professional speaker, and life coach. He's also a C-level executive and part of several startups. He's committed to helping people overcome and achieve in their lives after overcoming his own challenges. His first best-selling book, Do a Day, teaches his approach to overcoming what stands in our way in life. His latest book, The 50-75-100 Solution, Build Better Relationships, helps people see their power to make their relationships healthier and happier in business, in their family, and in life overall. He has spoken at TEDx events. He has written articles for many major publications like Inc. magazine, the Chicago Tribune, and LA Times. He's transformed his life inside and out, and he's here today to share how with you. Be sure to visit his website at bryanfalchuk.com. That's BRYANFALCHUK.com. Men of Abundance, it is my pleasure to once again introduce you to Bryan Falchuk. Bryan, welcome back to Men of Abundance, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to be back. I've been hoping to reconnect with you for a while, so I like the excuse. Getting to reconnect with you. Yeah,
for sure. It's been a long time. You know what? It's been, I'm looking at, it was episode 161. So
okay.
menofabundance.com/161 for those of you who want to go back and check out our first conversation, which was really cool. talking about Do a Day, which I love the concept. I'm not going to spoil it. You guys go back and listen to that. But that was on January 18th, 2018, brother.
Oh, my God. It's almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's when this posted
off.
anyway. So we actually talked even a month or so before that.
Yeah.
You know, so... and we've been connecting, bouncing back and forth off each other, running into each other in various groups on Facebook and stuff like that, and just kind of checking out what each other is doing. And now you got a new book coming out, man, or is already out. So that's what I wanted to have a conversation with you and get you back on and have a conversation about that. But what's new? What's been going on?
God, a lot. A lot has changed since we talked last time. I mean, it was still really early for me in the whole book and writing and stuff journey. So things have just grown. Like I've been, doing a lot of talking and or speaking, I should say. Like, I'm always doing a lot of talking. Just ask my wife. But just getting the message out. And since we talked, and this is one of the things we kept trying to connect about, was I launched a podcast based on Do a Day that's all about, Do a Day is my story and the lessons I learned coming out of my story and living, in my story. And then the show is other people that have a story, that have a lesson, that have growth that they brought out of something that, a lot of people might be in the midst of and say, well, how do you grow in this? I'm done. Mm-hmm. People who've, what's today? Wednesday, I guess we're recording this. Yesterday, I released an episode with a woman whose husband was murdered in cold blood. They never caught the guy when they had a 2-year-old kid. And, it's like, how do you live through that? How do you come through that? And, God, I know you have a lot of dads who listen to the show. Mm-hmm. So like, just put yourself in that kind of position, thinking about what your kid's going through and how do you go through your own grief and show up for your child and help them through theirs for life. So it's deep stuff. And, that's why I want to have you on. So we're recording that soon. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Talked about it for a while. Yeah. I want to get into your story more, but that's been me. And the whole time, also working on book number 2, which frankly took a lot longer than book number 1. It's different. a lot more research went into it. Whereas the first one just kind of came straight from my heart in a way I've been living. And this was like, well, I got to grow and learn to bring this one out. So that's been keeping me busy for a couple of years.
Yeah, those conversations, man, every time I get into that kick in the gut moment, sometimes I know the story, not every single time. And some of them have actually taken me to tears or on the verge of tears.
Yeah,
and some of them give me anxiety, quite frankly. But it's important, guys, to experience that through somebody else's life. And as a trained master resiliency trainer, to teach people how to be resilient, especially for those who have not been through significant emotional events. Mm-hmm. Your mind literally knows no difference between imagination and reality. So you can put yourself into those situations. That's why we like those stories like that. And then you think, well, how would I react? And you like to think you would react that way, but you really don't know until you're in that situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I think for all of us, whether each story that we hear from someone else resonates directly or not, it forces you to think. And like you're saying, like that's an exercise you can choose to do. And putting your mind in that kind of thought process, decision-making behavior, it forces introspection. And that's how we grow. And that's why I love this stuff. Like, even if, I'm never going to lose my husband because I'm not married to a man. Mm-hmm. But, so I could be like, oh, well, that, I don't have a 2-year-old anymore. I don't this, I don't that, or, whatever the situation might be, or someone who's like suffering with drug addiction is like, well, I don't use, so that's not me. I can't identify with it. Well, there are aspects of what they're going through that I promise you, if you really pause and dig, you're going to find something that connects and you're going to grow through that. But, that's why I listen to these things. And it's hard sometimes as a host. Mm-hmm. It's like there's somewhere I know enough to know I want them on the show, and I won't go into the detail because I kind of want to get it raw sometimes. But then I'm sitting there speechless, and I'm supposed to be running the show. So there's some tough. I just had that the other day, and I was like, "Oh, pull it together, man! You got to say something." Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and it's real. And I got a specific question for you here in just a minute that I personally experienced. But before we do, I want to back up real quick because I like to start out every conversation with an attitude of gratitude. We're already off the normal beaten path because you're a second-time guest. But share with us, what are you grateful for today, Bryan?
I mean, it sounds cheesy maybe, but I am really just grateful to connect with you live. Like we've traded emails again, but it's just nice to get to, we kind of hit it off, and I felt this connection with you and listening to your show and listening to you on a bunch of other shows. So I am in this very moment, I'm really thankful for that. Bigger picture, I'm staring at the proof of my next book. That's something that there were moments I wasn't sure I was going to get here. Like it was quite a struggle at different points, and I had so much else going on that I cared about that I was like, maybe I'm forcing this and I shouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to, and I believed in it. I believe in the message, and so to be able to look at it manifested, I'm thankful for that, because now it's real and I have a release date and all that. So it's like I'm not backing out anymore. It feels good.
Man, that's super exciting. Yeah, so that's amazing. The book is like a child. I mean, I got my one book sitting here. I've got two more that are in my head. Some of it's on screen. I would say on paper, but I've been typing it out.
Yeah.
It's in electrons and digits, in various chapters. It's all over the darn place. And one of these days I'll get a publisher and put it all together. But once that whole process is done, it really is. I mean, it's like your child. You put so much time into it and nurtured it, and now you want to help it grow. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to help it grow a little bit and get the word out there about it, because that's some of the best books ever written haven't been read because the author had no idea how to market the book, and they're like, well, I don't want to sell. I don't want to, tell what you write the book for. People need to hear it. So I want to make sure people get a hold of your book, man. So, but before we get into that, one of the questions that I was thinking about when we were talking earlier before the attitude of gratitude is, we're talking about putting ourselves into this mindset, and it just got me thinking it might be completely irrelevant to the conversation, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Sometimes when I'm driving down the street, and I get this from my military time when I was in the military, when we used to be in foreign countries and stuff, we always have to anticipate any possible situations. Even though we practice, rehearse, any number of things can happen. So as I'm driving down the street, I'm thinking, what's going to happen if a kid randomly runs out in front of us right here with a IED or a bomb or something like that, or because kids are just all over the place. That was one of our biggest obstacles traveling around the world in these big vehicles, because they're not easy to stop. And I'd still do the same thing today driving down the street. And just last night, for instance, I left my two boys over here. I went to an event. My wife was out, and I thought, what if something happens to me right now? Type of thing. Have I got everything in order? Yeah. Insurance, income, all this other kind of stuff. Do you think about stuff like that? And does that take up any space in your mind?
Yeah, well, I've worked in insurance for 20 years.
There you go.
Yeah. So that is on my mind. I actually just had a guy on who lost his wife, 3 little kids, and like financially he was okay. He had like real estate investments that just kind of kicked off income, so he didn't have to work. And so he thought he was all right, and then he went through the experience and realized all the ways he wasn't. And so, that's brought it even more front and center. And I travel a lot. So like when I'm on those planes and, the turbulence hits, or even just thought of like, well, what if, that always kind of brings it back to me as like, do I really have everything in order? Or even I do, but does my wife know where everything's at, and would she know what to do? And so that it has been on my mind quite a bit. And for those who listen to episode 161, I almost lost my wife to chronic illness in 2011. I was trying to do the math. Was that just over 8 years ago now? And so we've had to think about her mortality a lot, and I feel pretty prepared for that. Obviously not emotionally, but otherwise. But mine was just sort of taken as a given, and that's what I've been thinking about a lot more lately, now that she's in a stable place. Yeah.
I mean, we feel invincible as men, and as we get older, I'm 50 now, and you realize you're not as invincible as I was when I was 20 and 30, and even 40. But the emotional, you can't really plan for the emotional per se.
No.
But when a family can ensure that certain things are in place so that at least financially
Yeah.
and stability wise, insurance, income, all that kind of stuff is in place, then you're at least leaving them in a better place, because you add complete lifestyle change to the emotions of losing somebody that you've lived your life with. It just truly compounds on that. And I believe it's my responsibility. And guys, you can take that on yourself. And ladies that are listening, it's your responsibility too, to make sure that kind of stuff is in place to make it much easier. My stepdad was completely 100% against having any sort of thing like that in place for when he passed away. And he was, I think, 20 years older than my mom. He passed away. And as soon as he did, my mom got a 401k, she got a Roth IRA, she got insurance, and she got all this stuff, so that when she passed away, it was easier on us. We didn't have to pay for the funeral. All this stuff was taken care of. And so I saw the differences there. And then, of course, when my dad died, actually, there was nothing. He was a veteran, but literally, I mean, kind of funny story. We literally he worked at the golf course. They bought the backhoe from the golf course, dug the hole. And then we went down to the corner and stuff, and they want to, give us this fancy casket, this device to lower the thing into the hole and all this other kind of stuff. And my uncle was like, "You're doing a bunch of poor people over here, man. We got ropes and guys." We'll bury him in the box he's in, type of thing. And because it's expensive, it's ridiculous. So take care of that stuff, guys.
Well said.
Yeah. So let's change subjects, man. Let's lift this up a little bit more. And don't get me wrong, that stuff's extremely important. But what's your new book about, man? What's coming up? What do you got for us?
Yeah. So the hardest part of the book is the title. It's to do a day. People are like, oh, that's interesting. I can remember that. And then I tell them this one is the 50, 75, 100 solution. And there's a subtitle that helps, but it's build better relationships. And that's what it's really about. So the 50, 75, 100 solution is an approach. It's a mentality. It's an understanding of relationship dynamics through just kind of like our half and their half and how it all breaks apart. That's where the numbers come in. I'll walk you through that. But it's ultimately like, look, we all have relationships. And I don't just mean romantic relationships. It's anything. Relationships with our kids or being a kid. Like everyone is that relationship, whether your parents are around or not. You're still somebody's kid. And that relationship means something to you. Step siblings, romantic or ex-romantic relationships, whether you're married or not, coworkers, your boss, your subordinates, even just driving down the street, other drivers around you, going to a store and the person checking you out, or, how do they treat you? These are all relationships, and they influence how we experience life. And a lot of us struggle with them. And maybe it's the casual ones we struggle with. Maybe it's the work ones. Maybe it's the ones in our home, whether it's the home we chose as adults or the home we were born into as kids, and how that evolves over time and those relationships change. And look, it came out of the same thing as Do a Day, my own struggles. Like, I will always have things that I struggle with personally from an achievement or a challenge standpoint. That's kind of what Do a Day is about. But no matter how much I work on me, I still have these outward things about other people that, some are good, some aren't. Some are easier, some are a lot harder, and have the power to take me down, or I give them the power to take me down. And so I was like, I want that to change. I want that to be better, and I need to understand my hand in it. Because just sitting here saying they're doing this to me, or why don't they just love me, or if they could just, like, if I just do this, then they'll like me better and they'll be nicer. That's not really working so well. So what are the and more structurally and sort of for my own sake, like if whether I'm the problem or not, maybe I can still be the solution. So it's kind of what 50, 75, 100 ultimately is about, whether you can remember the numbers or not.
What does 50, 75, and 100 represent?
All right, so I'm gonna take you through where the numbers come from, and then there's like a methodology for using that structural understanding to actually move things forward. So what we're talking about is take a relationship and like two of us, and whether that's like two groups or me and three others, like it's the piece that you're a part of and the piece that the other side's a part of. So 50-50, that's the first number. Like there's two halves to the equation. two sides to every story. That's the easy one. Where the 75 comes in is the next level of understanding is each of those halves actually split in half. So there's 4 quarters, 4 25% pieces. 75 is 50, you're 50 plus one of their quarters. So I'll walk you through the quarters. Basically, each of us, your half and their half, is made up of either actions or reactions. That's how we split in half again. So a quarter of the total is what I'm acting, like how I'm choosing, what I'm choosing to put out there. And the other half is how I'm reacting to what I'm experiencing in life, in the relationship. And they're going through the same thing. So half of them is what they're just, of their own free will choosing to put out there. And the other half is the reactions that they have to what you're putting out there. 75 comes from the fact that you got to own your half. And I don't think anyone argues with that, right? We can do better with our own half. That's in our control, not just influence, but control. Mm-hmm. But by extension, you can influence half of them because half of them comes from what you're putting out there. It shows up as their reactions. So what if you gave them something different to react to? So you're going to change what's going on in your half, and you're going to put something else out there to get a different response from them. So now you're talking about control and influence over 3/4 of the equation, 75%. Mm-hmm. If you can control and influence better in 3/4 of the problem, you get to 100% better. So that's the 3 numbers, 50, 75, and 100. The issue is, what does better mean? In some relationships, better is happy. Better is great. It's supportive, it's loving. In others, better may be not bad. I have a coworker story where a coworker was trying to get me fired, and it was pretty nasty. Better was pretty honest about this. I used the example in the TED Talk I did on this idea, and I was like, we didn't like lock hands and go skipping off into the sunset together. That's not reality. Mm-hmm. We are not best friends. We actually were friends before she kind of turned and started attacking. Turns out she was covering up a serious mistake on her part, and she was lying to everyone. So she got very attacky with anybody who potentially could have been her downfall. I like to just admit if I've screwed up instead of hiding it and trying to get everyone else fired. But, that was her approach.
Yeah.
But, it was never going to be like we're best friends and we love spending time together and it's all fine. Like, it was difficult, but we could work together and it was productive and it was, beneficial for what we were both trying to achieve rather than like duplicitous trying to cut each other. Her trying to get me fired, me having to defend myself, like that's not sustainable. So I wanted to get not just to like, well, maybe if I just don't talk to her, it'll be fine, but where we could actually work together for the betterment of the business, even if I didn't count her amongst my friends.
Right. Yeah, that makes more sense, obviously, because I'm just thinking back to one of the more recent books that I listened to, which was Extreme Ownership. With Jocko Willink. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they talked about in there was they had 2 employees, top employees, like their top guys, that just did not get along.
Yeah. And
Jocko's team's advice was fire both of them. First, go find the 2 to replace them. Talk to the team. We're going to replace. And I don't want to get into the whole story, especially for those of you who haven't read the book. I suggest reading the book. It's a little bit combat heavy, even for me as a retired combat medic, as far as a business book is concerned. But a lot of great lessons out of there. The point is, if you're having a situation like that in your job, at your job, guys and gals, you better figure that out, because any good business owner, any great manager, leader is not going to allow such a toxic relationship in their organization for very long.
Yeah. Yeah, most do, though. That's what bothers me.
That's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
Being a business and marketing strategist, I see it all the time, and I'm like, John, you got to fire this guy. Well, he's my brother-in-law. I could care less. You've been paying the guy for years, and he's not doing anything for the organization but causing problems, taking money. Yeah, I see it all the time too. Yeah, and that simple thing.
And what's the poison that they're putting out in the well for everybody else?
Right. Yeah, they're not helping. Exactly that. That's that one relationship toxic relationship or one toxic person, regardless of who it is the bad apple for the entire organization. Get rid of that one and you'll see amazing changes.
Yeah.
Because you're setting a precedent. You're saying, I care more about the organization and the people in it than I do this one person or these two people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's really easy to look at, like a top performer who's bad for the organization, is bad to other people, just does it culturally is a negative. It's really easy to focus on what they are doing and say, well, how are we going to give that up?
Yeah.
And not realizing like maybe everyone can just sort of deal with it. Really? Mm-mm. Think about so they might be doing 100,000 in business a month and everyone else is doing 20,000 less than they would if that person wasn't making life miserable or stealing from them or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, how many people are giving up 20K? And it's like, you may find actually it was like 400,000 in upside by getting rid of this person. And you're underestimating the downside that they're having, and you're probably overestimating the pain of replacing them.
Yeah.
Because the organization will rise up and thrive.
Absolutely.
And I've seen it time and time again, that hesitation. Both. And then once you do it, it's like, we should have done that. Everyone was right. I should have listened. Yeah. It's not easy. I take that. No, it is not easy, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Yeah. I've heard the terms, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
I kind of caveat that in that if it's a new employee, it's somebody that has to be nurtured and you have to properly train them. As a leader, you can't just say, well, they don't know what they're doing. Well, because it was your responsibility to make sure they knew what they were doing. But if they're consistently, if it's a consistent pattern, then you just got to make that quick adjustment. Now, what the TED Talk and everything else you have going on, what are the what's coming out of it? What are the great stories? What's the feedback you're getting from the project so far? Because it's more than just the book. You've been working on this stuff for some time. And what is the effects of this having on personal relationships and relationships within organizations?
Yeah. So there's a number of ways that I've been using this regardless of the book not being out yet. First of all, the most telling is actually I'm still married. So that's where this all it became an imperative for me to do the work that led to understanding the approach. And we talked through the math, but there's actually tools behind it that's like, well, that's great to understand my half and their half, and I can influence and, whatever your numbers mean, Brian, but how? It's not like I'm sitting here and being like, I want to be destructive. I want this to end horribly. People generally would rather things are good and happy and supportive and productive. The question is how. And so that's where the book really gets into the meat, is the tools behind that. And it was my own journey in my relationship with my wife, which was difficult. We were, in the wake of her illness, we both fell into these roles. And, I talk about this really openly in Do a Day. I was not the husband she needed when she was at her lowest point physically and when she was facing not surviving.
And why is that?
Because I was struggling. I wasn't sleeping around. I wasn't doing I wasn't doing overtly bad things. But what I wasn't doing is standing by her, because I have a lot of anxiety issues from my own past, and I never dealt with them, and they totally came to a head then. And so when she was needing me to be there for her, I was reacting to everything's falling apart and I'm spiraling out of control and I can't take this, and you're going to be fine. Stop talking that way. You're making it worse by being so negative, whatever it is, snapping instead of just hearing her and standing with her, and that's the scariest moment she's ever faced, was that whole several month ordeal.
I'm shaking my head and thinking about that time of my marriage. And I'm guessing, I just imagine myself us having this conversation in front of a group of men and seeing a bunch of North and South, if they're being honest with themselves. And I'm talking to you listeners, you're probably sitting there thinking, there was a time, if not right now, there was a time. And if it is right now, I'm hoping you're listening to this and taking heed, because I've been there as well.
Yeah. And look, you don't, maybe you don't want to admit it. Maybe you're afraid of your kids finding out or whatever. I get that. Regardless of how it ends up, it needs to be better. You need conscious uncoupling, like Gwyneth Paltrow, Chris Martin, that they, and everyone kind of made fun of him for the term. Actually, I'm a big fan of that. If you can do that, if you can realize, like, look, we can't actually be together. This is not a relationship in that respect, but we're still parents. We still have these kids. We should still be able to coexist without hating each other. I mean, like, my parents' divorce was not good. They're actually great now. Like, we just had a big family dinner at my mother's house. My father and stepmother were there, and that's like, rewind 20 years? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of good reasons why it couldn't have worked 20 years and why it is working now. There's different, like, my stepfather's a different stepfather than I had back then, and my mother's changed, and, blah, blah, blah. But, God, I wish as a kid I didn't have to experience the nastiness of the divorce. Like, they shouldn't be together. I'm good with that. I don't want, some people are like, oh, I wish my parents would stay married. I don't. That is the right answer for them not to be together. But I had some just terrible, terrible experiences as a little kid with the two of them hating each other and living that outwardly. Right. What if you could avoid that?
And then bringing you into the middle of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, God, yeah. I've seen it all the time.
Yeah. Well, I dealt with it too. My parents got divorced when I was a teenager. And it was the worst thing to me at the time. And I hated, and with a capital H, my stepdad. Now realizing, and even for many years realizing that was the best thing my mother could have ever done. She became creative. I never knew she was a creative person, because it was just a stressful environment living with my dad, who was a big kid and didn't, long story, but it ended up being good, but not tracking. Yeah. Same thing, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my marriage is, we're still married. And it's not just because we tolerate each other. So that's a huge piece of it. And we got tons more work to do, and that's okay, because everything to me, like, I don't believe in them. Like, oh, we're good now, it's all done. Life's a journey, and you grow and change. And she's changed as a person. I've changed, and I want to keep going on that journey. So, that's first and foremost for me. And for my son's sake, like, obviously he would like everything to be cool. So that's a big piece of it. But then, as I went through this self-work, I started to learn things. And as I'm coaching people, I'm hearing about their relationship issues. And I'm like, this is resonating with what I'm learning for myself and for my own understanding about how to make things better. And I'm starting to apply it, and it's working really well for me. There's something to this. So I start sharing some of the, like, I started studying Buddhism. And I learned a number of ways to look at things and to relate to people and to understand myself and what the possibilities are. And so I started sharing that, and I finding that, my clients who forget, like, their relationship with their spouse, it's about their boss or their co-founder or their employee or their whatever. I was doing a lot of, like, career kind of and business coaching and executive coaching, and the same principles are working there. And, there's two co-founders. I was coaching one of them of this startup, and I mean, it could not have been any more oil and water. And the one I was coaching had some serious rage issues from a very violent childhood. And, he's like, and I want to punch him so badly, and I'm not just punch him. He's like describing what he wants to occur from those punches, like, his skull. And I'm like, and he means it. And so to have them in a different place, like, they're really different people. They're not ultimately right for each other, but their business is thriving because they know how to work together now. And a big part of it was addressing just this whole relationship and recognizing what the dynamic is. And you can't break the other person into liking you, being different, any of that stuff. That's just not going to work. Yeah. So it's about changing the perspective and, on and on into these other relationships, whether it's with friends or different situations I was facing. And I start to see all this change. And that's not to say I'm this enlightened, perfect person with all good relationships. I get plenty of tough moments, but I understand them differently. And I have a different set of tools to apply to them, either in the moment or as I look back afterward. I'm like, wow, that was not how it could have gone, and I could have done better. So now I know how to fix it. And I do. That's
brilliant. Absolutely love it. It's all about the outcome, guys. The difficult part about doing like what you're doing, Bryan, and I've found this because I've been working with a couple other different coaches as we were talking pre-show. They have brilliant tools and brilliant strategies. One thing they're missing is how to share that with the people that they want to work with. Basically, one word, marketing. They just don't know how to package that and put it out there. Because ultimately that's what people want. Exactly what you just expressed in your personal relationship and in a business relationship. I don't have to always like the people I work with. You don't always have that luxury. You should at least like the person you're living with. But the people you're working with is different. It is different. And quite frankly, sometimes the people that compliment you are assholes, to say, maybe you're the asshole, but you're very good at what you do. It goes back to that whole thing. But learning how to have that relationship, that symbiotic relationship where it works and we can still be productive, that's extremely important. And it's so powerful, dude. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
So, brother, we are going to close this up, man. Before we do, what did we not already talk about that you want to ensure that our Men of Abundance get out of this conversation? And how can we get a hold of your book and more about what you're doing?
Yeah. So I want to hit on the 3 principles that get to the how, and invite people to explore them. So there's 3 things that let you figure out how to control your half and influence half of the other person. And it's these 3 Buddhist ideas. So the first is happiness seeking. This is the idea that we all just seek to be happy. Like, we don't get up to ruin life for other people. We want something, and maybe that person's in the way. But understanding that helps you feel less attacked and threatened. And it also helps you see what is it you need to appeal to help the other person, to influence how they're behaving in the relationship. So happiness seeking is the first, and that's really the most important. The next is interdependence. It's how no one just exists in and of themselves. We exist in relation to other things, other people, other situations. It's why, you can have a bully who has friends. You can have someone who's a jerk to you and nice to someone else, or, nice to you in one minute and mean to you in the other. It's why we fight with people we love. So recognizing that you change the person or you change the situation, you get a different reaction, you get a different interaction, different relationship. So that's kind of look, there is a mechanism to make this change happen. And lastly is impermanence, is everything changes. That's the only permanent thing in the world is change. So the fact that you now know maybe what's operating within them, what you need to appeal to, and change your interpretation of their behavior, that change will make the relationship different through the interconnectedness. Like, you change something, it's going to happen differently. And because of impermanence, it gives you hope that actually everything changes. So they're not always going to be terrible to you, always and forever. You just need to know how to bring about that change. So those are the 3 tools, concepts behind the whole idea. And if people go to 5075100.com, usually send people to my own website, but that's for the book. You can get the book there. You can learn a little bit more about it, but you can also watch the TED Talks. If you have, I think it's 13 minutes and 10 seconds, something like that. It's less than 15 minutes. You can get the gist of the idea. And if that interests you, grab the book. It's coming out November 19th, and I'm selling it for 99 cents in the pre-order on Kindle. So easy way to grab it. It's an easy thing to take in that I know everybody needs, because we all have relationships. Even if you're a hermit, you still got relationships. They're just inside of you with your past, and maybe that's why you're a hermit. Yeah. So
even if it's with your other alter egos, you still have a relationship.
Yeah, you definitely need to get along with them because you're stuck with them, right?
Yeah, exactly. I got one question for you that may lead to others, but so change. My thought process is that I used to think that I cannot change another person. I now know better because of the training that I personally have. Yeah. That I can in fact change another person. Other people out there saying no, can't do it. How you can't change anybody else? I can only react the way I'm going to react to the situation, which may or may not change the behavior or even the mindset of the other person or group of people that I'm having to work with or live with. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of want to say I fit in the middle, but I'd say I think we'd end up in the same place. I just might say it differently. So in my own coaching work, I say explicitly, I don't change people. I don't change you. I help you change yourself. And I think that's the key is, you'll notice when I talked about moving from 50 to 75, I don't say control over 3/4. I say control and influence, because you cannot control them. And I think that's part of the problem for a lot of us is we want control, or we think it's stuck because we can't just do it. We can't just control them. Well, you can't. You do have influence over them. They ultimately have to be the one to change, but man, that influence can be really strong. And you can guide them there, and they may not even realize it. And so they will find themselves in a place where change is the only possibility. So, and I found that with people who are, like this coworker, like vehemently opposed to my existence and doing everything in her power to try to get me taken out. She moved to a completely different place, and it wasn't because the boss told her to. It's because I interacted with her totally differently than what she ever would have expected, and realized I can help save her, not get her fired. And so that's where, like, did I change her? You could argue that. I think I gave her no choice but to change by showing her a totally different path. And so maybe it's the same thing, but maybe it's more of a kind of a symbiotic view on it. That influence is really powerful. So there really is going to be no choice but for that change to happen. But I still sit the control in the other person's hands. And I think it's helpful for us to recognize that, so then we don't feel so let down either in ourselves or in our expectations of others when we think like, well, I did this, why didn't you do that? So it's not that simple.
It's not. It's a learned skill, and it takes a lot of practice. And it is very much possible. Thanks for that, man, and thanks for your perspective on that. It's super important too. That's part of the reason why a lot of the stuff that we're doing here, that I do here on Men of Abundance, a lot of the conversations, quite frankly, we, like you said, they all end up at the same result, but it's how it's expressed, it's how it's done, it's the experiences that make the difference. That maybe one of these episodes will resonate with that right person, with you, the listener, and everybody else. That's why it's so important to consume so many different types of content and information, so that you can find that one thing that's going to help you move forward in that part of your life. Yeah,
I agree.
Wonderful, man. So we are going to have your website linked up in the show notes, and I'll just have that one link there, guys, because I want you to go to Bryan's site to take a look at the book, to watch the TED Talk. Everything you need to do will be right there on that link. So make sure you check out the show notes at Men of Abundance. Just search Bryan Falchuk, and it'll all be there. And you'll also find episode 161. Highly encourage you to go back and listen to that one, because that one got really deep. That was one of the ones that really touched me. Bryan, it's been a pleasure talking with you again. Personally, we've been bouncing back and forth on email. I look forward to talking with you on Friday to get onto your show. And super excited about sharing my story with your listeners.
Oh, it's going to be awesome, Wally. I can't wait.
Excellent. So, brother, go out, live your life of abundance, man. Keep paying it forward like you are, because you are doing it in such a huge way, and I really dig it, man. It's making a big difference.
Oh, thanks, Wally. You too, man.
My pleasure. That's a wrap.
Cool. Hey, I've got this recorded on this end, too, if you need my audio or anything.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I appreciate it. I'll put that in my notes.
Awesome, man.
But so far, so good. It was all good.
Cool. Hey, this is the first one I've done on the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good deal, man.
I've always been talking about do a day, so I just started doing these.
Good.
So thank you for guinea pigging.
For sure, man. For sure. And I'll make sure that I get you plugged in here and get you out sooner than later. Actually, would you like to go out before the launch, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
If that's possible.
Let me push you forward. Because I'm literally, I've got episodes that aren't even edited yet that won't go out until a couple months from now, man. Yeah. I'm just, it's ridiculous.
If you can, that's awesome.
Yeah, let me push you out. Too easy, man.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you on Friday.
I'll talk to you Friday, man. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, listen, I greatly appreciate you sticking around to the end of the conversation, for those of you who do. And just for doing so, I want to offer you something that I've never done before. I want to offer you a 30-minute conversation with me for whatever it is that you want to talk about, whether it's living a life of abundance, paying it forward, being grateful for things that you currently have in your life today on your way to having more, or if you're a business owner and you want to seriously increase your revenue over the next 12 months anything of that nature, I would love to have a conversation with you. And seriously, this is literally just right off the cuff. As I'm here closing out this episode and recording this, it just popped into my head to offer this to those of you who stick around to the very end. And to book that 30-minute call with me, all you have to do is get onto my scheduler. The easiest way to do that is to click on the schedule link in the show notes of this episode. I'll title it 30-Minute Call with Wally, and there'll be a link right there. Now, if for some reason you cannot get into the show notes and click on that link, I'm going to share with you the URL. It's https://wallycarmichael.as.me/discovery. wallycarmichael.as.me/discovery. I look forward to having a conversation with you. Now, go out and live your life of abundance, and make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.